Musical theater, a theater that employs a full singing score, usually accompanied by an orchestra, and often danced as well. Most drama throughout the ages has been musical. Greek tragedy was sung and danced. Most Renaissance and Commedia dell'arte plays included songs and instrumental music. 25 of Shakespeare's 38 plays contained at least some singing, and his comedies each ended with a full stage company dance. In the 17th century, musical masques and comedic ballets were all the rage in the courts of England and France. Still, musical theater has become a specific genre of its own just over the past 150 years, evolving initially simply to provoke audience merriment by absorbing elements of light opera, ballet, the English music hall, the Folies Bergère in Paris, the American minstrel show, and vaudeville variety shows. But the commercial appeal is not the sum of musical theater's international importance. Musical theater is a dramatic form of great variety, vitality, and, on occasion, artistic significance. The Pulitzer Prize has been awarded to 9 musicals, including A Chorus Line, Rent, Next to Normal, and, of course, Hamilton. America didn't invent musical theater per se, and it no longer dominates the genre. But the Broadway musical form is America's best-known contribution to the world of theater, and New York remains the capital of the world's musical theater, with London, Toronto, and Sydney offering stiff competition these days. During the past decade, as much as 80% of Broadway's box office has derived from musicals alone. Up to 1/3 of the main theaters in Berlin, Budapest, Tokyo, Sydney, and Stockholm are at any given moment hosting a run of a Broadway musical. America's first true Broadway musical dates back to 1866 with the staging of The Black Crook, which was a melodrama with added dancing by chorus girls. The light operas of the English duo Gilbert and Sullivan were also being performed in New York at this time, as well as the Opera Bouffe, the comic opera of France, and the Viennese operetta. Audiences flocked to these imports, and American writers emerged to create a homegrown product that could compete. The first was Victor Herbert's Babes in Toyland and Naughty Marietta, followed by George M. Cohan's Little Johnny Jones, which includes his signature song Yankee Doodle Dandy and Give My Regards to Broadway. By 1910, American musical theater was becoming the world leader in musical comedy. We can divide musical theater in the 20th century into 3 distinct phases: the Great Age of Musical Comedy, from 1900 to the late 20s, early 30s, the Golden Age of Musical Theater, roughly the 1930s through the late 50s, and the Contemporary Musical, 1960s to the present. From the 1900s through the late 20s and early 30s, there existed what we now refer to as the Great Age of Musical Comedy. With all these musical comedies had in common were simple plots, a cast composed of strictly romantic and comedic characters, and lots of pretty girls in revealing costumes and abundantly cheerful singing and dancing that had little or no connection to the plot. The composers of the day were George and Ira Gershwin, Jerome Kern, Rodgers and Hart, names that still define musical theater today. The songs from these musicals have become staples in the repertoire of literally hundreds of modern jazz singers. The Golden Age began in 1925 with Showboat, and it continued through the 1950s, ushering in a new genre of musical theater, the musical drama. The musical drama was characterized by increasingly serious plots and more sophisticated musical treatments. In 1932, the Gershwins won the first Pulitzer Prize ever awarded to a musical for their political satire of Thee I Sing. By the end of the Second World War, seriously themed Broadway musicals dominated the commercial American theater. During the late 40s and the early 50s, Rodgers and Hammerstein gave us a string of hits dealing with serious themes like social and sexual tensions in the opening of the Western states, Oklahoma, spousal abuse, Carousel, racial prejudice, South Pacific, ethnocentricity, The King and I, and Nazism, The Sound of Music. All these shows were marked with social and intercultural conflict, romantic settings and songs, beautiful solos, love duets, and big choreographed choral numbers. Not all musicals of the 40s and 50s were serious and sober. There were more lighthearted and satirical musicals that still featured well-integrated plots, characters, themes, and musical styles. These included Guys and Dolls, Kiss Me Kate, Annie Get Your Gun, Pajama Game, Damn Yankees, Brigadoon, and My Fair Lady. If you enjoy jazz standards, you will find that many of these names are familiar to you. That's because theater played a central role in American pop culture in the 1940s and 50s. The musicals ran on Broadway for years rather than weeks or months. Touring companies took the best of the shows to regional theaters throughout the country, just as they do today. Songs from the best musicals routinely made the radio. They were a part of the hit parade, which was the 1950s version of the top 10 or the top 40 list. Film versions were made of many musicals. The stars of the Broadway musicals, Jimmy Durante, Mary Martin, Carol Channing, Julie Andrews, Rex Harrison, and Bob Hope, achieved national celebrity status. Many became pioneer performers on America's new entertainment medium, television. The bulk of musicals produced in America today are revivals of the great musicals produced in the mid-century, the Golden Age. But there is another genre, what we refer to as the contemporary musical. The contemporary musical differs from the musicals of the Golden Age in that they are less sentimental, more ironic, less rhapsodic musically, and more choreographic. In fact, the past 60 years has seen a tremendous escalation in the importance of choreography in American musicals, and it has given rise to the choreographer directors. Jerome Robbins, Gower Champion, Bob Fosse, Tommy Tune, Michael Bennett, Susan Stroman. They are responsible for West Side Story, Fiddler on the Roof, Hello Dolly, 42nd Street, Chicago, Cabaret, A Chorus Line, The Producers, Young Frankenstein, and The Sister Act. The most influential composer-lyricist of this new contemporary musical, the man credited with developing this new style, is Stephen Sondheim. He has created a genre that is less sentimental and more ironic. His plays are marked by a disturbing plot with an ironic, even cynical tone, a brutal skepticism about conventional mortality. His musicals are highly sophisticated, adult, and intricately rhymed. Some of his works include Company, Follies, A Little Night Music, Pacific Overtures, Sweeney Todd, Sunday in the Park with George, which won a Pulitzer Prize, Into the Woods, Assassins, and Passion. Some of the most successful musicals running on Broadway and around the world at the turn of the century were not by Americans at all. They are the mega hits of the Englishman Andrew Lloyd Webber and of the Frenchmen Alain Boublil and Claude Michel Schomburg. Webber wrote Cats, Phantom, Evita, Sunset Boulevard, and Boublil and Schomburg wrote Les Mis and Miss Saigon. These works are all entirely sung and are known for their lush musical scores and special effects rather than a script. This explains their universal appeal. They have less of a language barrier to surmount. They are also known for their spectacle: falling chandeliers, fiery lakes, helicopters on stage. There are also two more recent arrivals from across the pond: Billy Elliot and Matilda the Musical. Then, of course, there is the large number of musicals today that are based on films: Newsies, Anastasia, Lion King, Beauty Beast, Kinky Boots, Spamalot, Hairspray, Heathers, Legally Blonde. And there is a wrath of jukebox musicals: Mamma Mia, Beautiful, Moving Out, Jersey Boys, American Idiot, Rock of Ages. New musicals of the 21st century, Hamilton, The Book of Mormon, Wicked, Hairspray, have offered the commercial success and broad entertainment of years gone by. But many musicals in the past 10 years have been tackling increasingly serious subjects: gender equality, suicide, infidelity and betrayal, bipolar disorder, assimilation, exploitation of scandal, etc. Topics very pertinent to society and its present ills. The result of these themes in musicals have resulted in a current musical theater trend that is much angrier and more generally shocking than previous eras. These shows have brought a much-needed younger audience to Broadway, and they have reinvigorated the American musical.